Hello, this is John Wecker with WBBA-TV. Thank you for joining us today. I am pleased to have with me today Dr. Charles Magness. Dr. Magness is the president and CEO as well as the co-founder of Kineta, a privately held biotechnology company based here in Seattle. Dr. Magness, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. I wonder if you could start and tell us a little bit about Kineta, and in particular, the uniqueness of your business model.
Right. Well, Kineta is really focused on translational development. We really decided when we started Kineta, we wanted to focus on a part of the business process in therapeutics development that's very challenging, and it presents actually a big opportunity in the industry. As you know, there are many drugs developed every year, but it's really not that many, probably, and it may be surprising to people coming through the pipeline. And so a lot of companies are developed to develop a specific program, whereas Kineta is really focused on developing a platform to develop many programs through the translational phase, bringing them out of the laboratory into the clinic, where we can then prepare them for commercialization.
Fantastic. And I understand the business model must be successful because you've had some really interesting results recently, in particular a clinical trial looking into its potential use in some autoimmune diseases like lupus or type 1 diabetes. Can you tell us about that data and the potential impact for patients?
Right. Well, dilazatide is the drug you're talking about. It's our poster child for our new business model. It's a program that we actually in-licensed and brought through. It has a very novel mechanism of action that we found very scientifically elegant and challenging to potentially address many different autoimmune diseases, everything ranging from multiple sclerosis to lupus, to type 1 diabetes potentially. And so we've been advancing that program. We completed all the preclinical work. We ran several volunteer studies as safety trials for phase 1. And then the trial you're speaking of is a phase 1B study we just completed in a psoriasis population. And it was a relatively small study that was primarily designed as a biomarker study to really validate this new mechanism that dilazatide uses to address the autoimmune disease at its basic level. And so it's very exciting because we actually got clinical observations that were positive in the trial. We actually saw an improvement in patients with psoriasis even in a very short time, in 4 weeks, which is pretty unusual for a short, smaller study. So that was very positive, and we're actually now still waiting on some of the biomarker data to come through from the laboratory, which is lagging behind just the clinical results we've already released. And we expect to be able to release those in the next few weeks, hopefully, as that data comes in. But we're very confident that we'll validate this new mechanism. And as I said, the potential here is really in a whole host of autoimmune diseases, with the potential that we could begin trials in things such as lupus, hopefully in the next few months.
This is incredibly exciting news. Congratulations. That's really great.
Thank you.
And in thinking again about your business model, how far in the development process do you see Kineta taking a product such as dilazatide, and as opposed to maybe looking for partners and going forward? How are you thinking about that?
Right. Well, our focus is really identifying these high-value drug programs that are preclinical but have the potential to come into the clinic and really dramatically improve the patient treatment paradigm in whatever disease of interest. And so that's really where our focus is in moving through this translational step. Ultimately, what we'd like to do is to bring these programs to market with the help of a larger partner who can commercialize them in large areas, things like lupus, like type 1 diabetes, like multiple sclerosis. And so we're looking for larger companies to help with that process. We're actively talking with a number of partners right now, and we expect that we will make some decisions in concert with a partner here over the coming months on that particular program. But again, that is a general model we're trying to apply to other areas such as antivirals, vaccines, and chronic pain.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, the antivirals. Tell us a little about what's happening with the antiviral space.
Well, so antivirals are an interesting situation in the industry because, as many people know, there are a lot of viruses that keep popping up, things like the Ebola epidemic that we just witnessed. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of tools in our arsenal to deal with these. And it was just a very, not a coincidence, but it was a fact that Kineta and our collaborators, such as Michael Gale at the University of Washington here in Seattle, have a lot of expertise in the antiviral area and the vaccine area. And we've been doing quite a bit of work in this area with NIH support to develop some new molecules that can address these challenges in a broader based way than the industry has typically done before. So again, it's more out of the box thinking, if you will, about new ways to address big problems across the board. And so we're working on programs where we can develop one drug that can potentially address a number of different viruses.
Wow.
And so we're having a lot of success there, and look forward to bringing some drugs into clinical development in the near term in that area.
That's great.
So,
yeah, biotech companies don't typically get into sort of these global health, global disease issues, and yet you've taken on that challenge. You obviously see some great potential there.
It's part of the larger issue. I mean, there's some obvious commercial areas of interest, things like influenza and respiratory syncytial virus that are big interest to commercial development in general. But when you're developing a drug that could potentially hit a number of these different viruses, you automatically are also foraging into global health. And so we do work in dengue and West Nile and Ebola, Lassa fever. We have a lot of different applications that we're working on there together with our collaborators around the world. So it's exciting, but it's a big problem, obviously, that needs to be addressed. And the problem, again, as I said, is we just don't have enough good tools in our therapeutics arsenal to deal with many of these diseases.
Great, good. I want to turn back to Dilazatide for a second, and I understand, at least in some of the pediatric indications, you've partnered with the Alliance for Clinical, the Alliance here
for Children's Therapeutics,
right,
with Seattle Children's. Right.
Yeah, can you tell us about that and how important that partnership is to the progress you're making?
Right, so last year we started an alliance with Seattle Children's Research Institute, the Alliance for Children's Therapeutics, which is really focused on a common thread between Kineta and Seattle Children's, obviously, which is developing more therapeutics aimed at treating children. And it's a big problem that I think many people don't really understand is out there, which is that many drugs are being developed for adults, obviously, but they're not often tested at an early stage in children. And so as a result, doctors that treat pediatric patients, doctors like Ann Stevens, our collaborator at Seattle Children's, often have to use drugs that have only been tested on adults, and maybe they have side effects that are not good for adults, but they're not terribly bad in terms of the longer term, but they can have a major impact on the development of a young teenage girl, for example. And so we're really interested in this alliance and trying to bring forward some drugs into earlier clinical development for pediatric applications. And so we're working with Ann, and we've actually made some really good progress over the past year in identifying with our Dilazatide program, as an example, some biomarkers in lupus patients that look pretty promising to help us to be able to actually design and enroll those trials to study patients with lupus and the application potentially for Dilazatide. So it's an area of intense interest, but ultimately we also see other areas in infectious disease and chronic pain that are applicable to children as well, as pretty much every disease is.
That's really exciting as well. So we're here in the Pacific Northwest, specifically Seattle. You formed a fantastic partnership. Do you see a lot of those opportunities in this area, and what do you find special about being in Seattle in the life sciences community?
Well, there's a great set of natural resources here we have in Seattle, and I think it's almost untapped still at some point. We've had a lot of big successes recently, particularly in immuno-oncology. There's a lot of news. Seattle's become kind of a major area for development in that area. But there are a lot of other disease areas that are still untapped, and I think we see a lot of natural resources here in terms of research and development that's going on in Seattle. And we've been working most recently with the University of Washington and CoMotion, their commercialization group there, to really try to advance some causes using our new business model to try to advance some causes to bring more drugs out of the laboratory and into the clinic. And that's what we're focused on in the local area. I think ultimately we're very much a collaborative company. We want to work with more researchers and more companies to help build up a critical mass, if you will, in Seattle of companies that can focus on therapeutics particularly. It's an area that I think there's a lot of room for Seattle to grow there and be even more of a leader in therapeutics development around the world.
Great, great. Well, I've been speaking today to Dr. Charles Magness, who's the president and CEO and co-founder of Kineta. Dr. Magness, it's really been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thanks, John.
For WBBA-TV, this is John Wecker.